All right, welcome everyone to another episode of Mezoomin. Me zoom in. Three rabbis, lots of opinions, and a senator tonight. So we are excited. We have a lot that is going on. I want to tell you that this week I felt like an umpire, especially tonight, because we've been davening outside, and I don't know if any of you realize, but around Mincha Marav time, uh, 3 out of the days of this week was a question. You call the game or not? Now, thank God, when it comes to making decisions like this, we have a weather wizard, weather consultant, Sherry Brownstein, on staff. I have to tell you, Sherry is never wrong about the weather. I think I'm not supposed to say that, so bli ayin hara. But she called it spot on. In fact, you know what she said tonight? She said, I think you'll get rain towards the end of your time there. And guess what? We got Mincha, we got a Kaddish, and then we had rain, so we had to call the game for Marv. But by the way, you should know all the stats count in the game. It's considered a full game for those purposes. And Rabbi Wecker had a couple of singles to start off, and that's going to raise his batting average. So he's good. We're good. We're glad that you're all joining us.
The Chazan pitched through the ninth inning.
That's right. That's right. He did. He stayed around for the rain delay for the people who were joining on Zoom. That's absolutely right. Rabbi Yoggev, have you seen anything interesting lately?
Besides your haircut?
No. Enough about my hair. By the way, thank you. Somebody asked me, I'm not going to a barber shop yet. My mom actually cut my hair, and she did a pretty good job.
Interesting part about it. No, I'm just joking.
No, she did it. She did a pretty good job. I mean, I asked to see the back like they show you in the barber shop. She wouldn't let me see it. So I don't know what to make of the back, but the front looks good.
Yeah, I don't want to tell them what I saw because I want them to stay on the Zoom, but there's a beautiful rainbow outside right now, actually. So I made a bracha.
Check it out. There it is, folks. Wow.
Yeah, it's right outside my house, I think, right?
Gorgeous.
Yep. It's a good segue. It's a good segue into our discussion because all the colors come together there, and we're bringing a senator in who's connected to everything that's happening.
Rabbi Yoggev, you're frozen. Are people hearing me?
In our country, so.
Oh, there you are. You came back. Are you hearing me? Okay, Rabbi Yoggev, you're frozen there for a moment. You know, we're going to come up with a terminology when you're on Zoom, and you think that there's a problem with the other people at first. You're saying, you're freezing, you're freezing, you're freezing. And then you start to realize everyone's freezing, and actually you're the one with the problem. It's not someone else's problem. It's a very awkward position. I want to tell her I'm going to go to Rabbi Yoggev for a moment for some opening words and for our trivia question. And after that, Rabbi Wohlberg is going to share some words and introduce our special guest. I just want to make sure that everybody knows that this Shabbat we are going back into the sanctuary. You need to register to join, so please do not just show up. I don't want to take our time now to go through all of our requirements and restrictions. They're all in the email. We're being very careful. There's a lot of space in between. There's more than 6 feet in between because that's how the sanctuary lines up. But I do want to tell everyone that tomorrow at 6:50, we'll be Zooming Mincha from the sanctuary, and I really encourage you to join us, not in person, on Zoom, and we'll have a little mini reopening words after that Mincha to celebrate our return to the sanctuary, which we hope will continue and remain and only grow. So I really, really want to encourage everyone who's with us to do that. And I want to also tell you that tomorrow afternoon, between 4 and 4:30, we're having a drive-by ice cream giveaway. So come on by, whether you're adults or your kids, drive through. And if anybody thinks that they're too old, too mature to come through, I want you to know that last week we had it especially for kids. And the first car to go through was Dr. Shore, who came to pick up ice cream for herself. So if Dr. Shore can come get ice cream, there we go. That's tomorrow, our ice cream unsocial. Then anyone else can come get ice cream and have a chance to say hello to us very safely and socially distanced. We hope to see you there. Rabbi Yoggev, how are you? And what's going on with our trivia this evening?
Yes, I'm doing well. Just wanted to read a nice quote from the Rebbe Lubavitch. Today was his yahrzeit, and then I'll read the trivia. It says, if you see what needs to be repaired and how to repair it, then you have found a piece of the world that God has left for you to complete. But if you only see what is wrong and what is ugly in the world, then it is you yourself that needs repair. I think it's a beautiful quote, just kind of focusing us on what needs to be done. And we have somebody on today who gets things done. So we're going to chat with him about all that in a moment. In the meanwhile, we have a trivia question for you. Be able to project that. All right, the question is, which miracle happened with Aaron's staff? The first question is, and first option is, it grew almonds. The second option is, it swallowed the staffs placed by the other 12 tribes. And the third option is, it grew 2 cubits longer than the other staffs. So if you think the answer is almonds, put it in. If you think the answer is it swallowed up the staffs, write swallow. If you think the answer is that it grew longer than the other staffs, put cubits. Those are the 3 options. We have a nice message connected to that. We'll share that with you at the end.
I think we already got all 3 answers also. I hope that we know. I don't know if your rabbis know the answer, so we'll have to see. We'll have to see how that goes. I'm not sure what the answer is.
I hope one of us at least knows it.
Rabbi Wohlberg, how you doing?
I'm just sitting here eating not almonds or watching snakes or anything. I'm just enjoying being home. I must tell you, I don't go out, but I'm really very, very comfortably ensconced here. But Rabbi Yoggev and Rabbi Posner will tell you, we've never worked harder. We spend hours and hours planning, especially about the high holidays. And next week, we're already going to tell you what all of our details are. Let me simply start by saying something that I never imagined I would be saying as a rabbi. Our synagogue will be open for the high holidays. So let's all look forward to seeing what that's all about. To start off tonight, I want to pick up from last week. I'm still into praising women. Last week, we spoke about how the spies who went to Israel, the 10 of them came back with a negative report, and the Kli Yakar, a famous commentator, said the problem was that men went. Had it been women, they were more perceptive and more loving of the land. They would have had a better report. On a similar thought, this week we have the rebellion of Korach. And it's very interesting to note that in the first sentence, it's told that it was Korach and his sidekicks, Dasan and Aviran, and then someone named On Ben Pelas. Later on, when the rebellion is put down and Korach and Dasan and Aviram are swallowed up in the earth, we don't hear any mention of On Ben Pelas. So how come he survived? There's a midrash that tells us that when On started the rebellion, he came home and he asked his wife what she thought, and she said, "You're crazy to be involved in this rebellion. What are you going to get out of it? Korach is going to take over. You're not going to be any better off." And so he listened to his wife, and he was saved. Korach came home and told his wife what was going on in the community, and she said to him, "Why do you allow Moshe to get all of the credit? You ought to go out there and seize the mantle of power." So on the one hand, his wife gave good advice. On the other hand, the wife gave bad advice. For all you men out there, what would you say your wife's track record is? So I would tell you that I see the picture of one woman who is smiling, and her name is Myrna Cardin. And Myrna has every reason to smile because she always gives good advice, not only to our senator, but to your rabbi as well. We're thrilled that we have Myrna with us. We're particularly thrilled, of course, that we have our native son, our Senator Ben Cardin. You know, you see Ben in shul, and he's one of the guys. There are only 100 of them in the world. There are only 100 in the world, and one of them davens in our shul. And that only, he adds luster to his family name, and he adds luster to the Beth Tefillah name as well. Ben, I don't see you, but I know that you're there. How are you?
Rabbi, I'm fine, but it's not fair. It's not
look,
fair for the other 99 senators because I can get advice from Myrna and from you, and they can't do that.
Well, speaking of advice from me, last week I called you and you didn't take my call, but you did call me right back. And you apologized and you said you didn't want to hang up on the King of Jordan, which I thought was a reasonable choice on your part.
Well, we just want to know, Rabbi, we want to know if the King of Jordan calls during Mezoomin, are you going to take the call?
Connect him to Myrna. So Ben, tell us, what do you talk about to the King of Jordan?
Well, we swapped some recipes because we're all caught at home. What is he doing? You know, we're catching up. But I tell you, King Abdullah is truly a very engaging person. I guess I have a chance to talk to him a couple times a year. He's usually in the United States. He generally wants to meet with members who he has a relationship with, members of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. So we did this by telephone. The primary purpose dealt with Israel and dealt with the region. As to the annexation issue, we had a chance to talk rather openly about it. And he was able to tell us some of the things that he has been doing with both Gantz and Netanyahu and Abbas, just to fill us in on some of the discussions that are taking place in the Middle East. He's very candid. He's a great friend of the United States, and he's a person who really wants to lead his country in a much more democratic way, and he really wants to see lasting peace with Israel. So it was a good conversation. It's always encouraging having a chance to talk to him, particularly when he brings his wife along. She's a real charmer.
Ain't nothing wrong with yours, Ben. Ain't nothing wrong with yours. And speaking of annexation, as if the Jewish people aren't divided enough, now we have this issue of annexation that's going to come out in a day or two or three. I think Netanyahu has to make the announcement. I know that you're no fan of what's taking place, and there are a lot of Jews who are no fans of it, just as obviously there are many Jews who, if Israel wants to do it, then we should support it. And I generally am amongst them, even though I may not always agree with what Israel is going to do. But there are people like yourself and real lovers of Israel amongst Israelis themselves who feel that this is a very dangerous move.
Well, let me tell you what I am a fan of, what I really want to see happen. I want to see the Palestinians and Israelis live side by side in peace. I want to make sure we have a secure Jewish state and there will be a Palestinian state living by each other, living side by side in peace. The only way you can get there is direct negotiations between the Israelis and the Palestinians. It can't happen any other way. So right now, Israel might be able to control some borders, but then they legitimate the actions of international organizations, which are going to be much more hostile to Israel in some of the unilateral things that they do. So my hope is that you have the direct negotiations. I worry that when you do unilateral action, that it can legitimate in some people's minds what third parties do that are against Israel. So that's my reason. My objective, I think, is the same as the Israelis. We want two states side by side in peace. And quite frankly, I think the annexation issue has become more of a political problem in Israel politics than it is resolving the borders between the Palestinians and the Israelis.
But what do you say to people who but the Palestinians never show up to negotiate?
Well, that's true. I mean, there's no question that the leadership has been unwilling to move forward towards peace. I can tell you, when you talk to King Abdullah of Jordan, or you talk to some of the other leaders in the region, they all recognize that their future is with peace with Israel. They need to have a growing economy, and it's got to get off the petro issues. So they all want to see peace in that region. So there'll be a great deal of pressure on the Palestinians in order to accept a reasonable compromise in regards to the two-state solution. As a matter of fact, everybody knows what it's going to look like. It's not that difficult to figure it out. There are some very tough issues on the status of Jerusalem. There's some other issues that might be complicated, but we can get there. So I think that the pressure can easily be put on the Palestinians to move forward with peace. We need to move. We need to get this done. We need the leadership of the United States helping facilitate that. But if it's looked at as a unilateral action, if the Jordanians believe that the two-state solution is dead, then it really does give them little options as to what they do, because the Palestinian issue then becomes a Jordanian issue, and they don't want to see that happen.
How do you feel about the Democratic Party now in relation to the state of Israel? There is genuine concern, and the recent primaries have taken out people who were considered very pro-Israel and replaced them with people who, let's just say, don't sound as pro as many of us would want them to sound. Is there a shift in the Democratic Party?
I don't believe there's a shift in the understanding of the Democratic Party of the importance of the relationship between Israel and the United States. It is in the U.S. interest to have a very close, special relationship with Israel. Israel's the only democratic country in that part of the region. They're a reliable source of information for us. Their intelligence information is the best. We have a lot of economic ties. So when we look for a country in that region we can work with and have confidence with and can rely on, it's Israel. So it's important for the United States. The Democratic Party knows that. The Republican Party knows that. The politics of the Prime Minister Netanyahu is not what mainstream Democrats would like to see as a leader of a country. There's no question that his tactics have been those that we find wrong, and we've disagreed with some of his decisions. By the way, we have found some of the decisions that the President of the United States has made is not to our liking. It doesn't affect, it does not affect our support and strength for the ties between our two countries. I think we confuse at times disagreement with Israeli policies of this current government with our support for the state of Israel. Our support for the state of Israel is solid. Look at the appropriations process. There's no doubt, no question whatsoever that the full funding is going to get through the Democrats without any trouble whatsoever, in the Senate without any trouble whatsoever. We have broad support for Israel. What we should resist, never make Israel a wedge political issue. Don't divide us. Remember, there are too many other problems in the world, and there's too many other things that our political system can be involved with. Don't weaken the strong support we have for Israel, and recognize there will be different views, but the bottom line support for Israel is still very strong, and it's our responsibility to make sure that we keep it that way.
Before we move on and come closer to home, you mentioned what King Abdullah is like. Of the leaders of the world that you've met, who would you consider to be the most fascinating or interesting?
Well, it depends on how you want to define fascinating or interesting. There are some incredible individuals I've had an opportunity to meet with around the world that have done just incredible things. Clearly, we have some extremely dangerous leaders around the world, which are remarkable. And Mr. Putin is one of the most effective leaders in modern times. He has the popular support of his country, and he rules it with an iron hand, and he's able to get his way. And he's able to do things politically that are amazing. Remember, the Russian economy is smaller than the Italian economy or the South Korean economy, and look how much influence they have globally.
Wow.
So you got to admire his ability to get things done, but he's very dangerous. He's a KGB guy. He's violated human rights, and I've taken him on in regards to the Magnitsky sanctions. So he's a case study. King Abdullah is really a person I admire greatly because we do have these candid discussions, and he's always looking for his country to progress from the point of view of democracy. So that's why I singled him out. I think Trudeau in Canada has presented some really interesting developments for our next door neighbor. He's had his challenges, but I think that he has presented some interesting leadership, and I've had a good relationship with him. There's some characters. Boris Johnson's a character in the UK. I think Merkel has been a strong leader for Germany. She's been able to really become the dominant player in Europe. So I give her a great deal of credit for the manner in which she has conducted her politics. Doesn't mean I agree with her on occasions. I strongly disagree with her energy policy with Russia. But these are world leaders that are engaging. What I find dangerous is when you have a world leader that will not engage and become part of the global community. That's certainly the problem we have today with Donald Trump. It's certainly a problem we're having, I think, with Boris Johnson in the UK. We need leaders that are willing to be engaged globally to help provide a saner and a safer world.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Can I follow up? I'm just curious. What do you think, Senator Cardin, is the makeup of someone like when you talked about Putin? You said, well, you know, he gets stuff done, like he knows how to get it done, and regardless of whether you agree with him or not, what makes a leader? What's the makeup of a leader that makes them be able to do that? You know, are they looking over? Is it that they're not looking over their shoulders, or is it that they're just very savvy? What is it? What's the makeup of a leader that can get stuff done?
I think he knows how to deal with his constituency. He knows he has to remain popular. Here you have a country, once again, that has had some major challenges in the last 20 to 30 years, but Putin has restored pride among the average Russian about how Russia has restored some of its power globally. So he's been smart enough to figure out how to do that, and he has been clever enough to say, look, okay, we may not have democracy in Russia. You know, we don't have free elections, so okay, we recognize that. But look at what's going on in the United States with their election process, or look what's going on here. No country's perfect. So I think he's been able to convince the Russians that he's leading their country with pride. They're doing better than they have done in the past. So he's been able to successfully convince the masses in Russia that he's the right person to lead his country. So he has their support, even though the Russian economy is not doing very well at all. I mean, even though he siphons off billions of dollars for his own personal gain, he's the wealthiest person in the world, and he's been a bureaucrat all of his life. So he's terrible. He's very corrupt, but he's able to get away with it. So it's his talent, and it's his KGB background. He does not allow for dissent. What happened with Sergei Magnitsky? Sergei Magnitsky discovered the corruption in Russia, and he reported it as a lawyer should to government officials. But it was part of the scheme that was enriching Putin that allowed him to have the resources to carry out his corrupt system of government. So Magnitsky was a threat. So what did he do? He had him arrested, tortured, and killed. He thought the world wouldn't pay any attention. But guess what? We put a spotlight on that. Bill Browder put a spotlight on it. John McCain and myself decided to do something about it. And we were so effective, and we got so much under his skin. It was the first issue brought up in the summit meeting between President Trump and President Putin was the Magnitsky sanctions. Can we get rid of them in the United States? So if you stand up to him, you can change him. The problem is in his own country, they do not. And we have seen, this is something to be concerned about, we've seen over the last 20 years a steady decline of democratic states around the world, a steady decline. So democracy is not as strong today as it was 20 years ago. We should never take for granted the democratic system of government. There are enemies that use our system to try to undermine our system. So we have to be careful about that.
All right, thank God things at home are so much better than what you're describing overseas. There's not much to talk about. Although you'll be interested to hear this because you've been involved in this. We had Reverend King on a couple of weeks ago, and as part of the conversation, he happened to mention that in the Ashburton public school, there is no Wi-Fi. And your fellow congregants were absolutely blown away by that realization. That in our day and age, in the 21st century, kids here in Baltimore, in the United States of America, had no access to Wi-Fi in their school, which meant that for the last 3 months, they didn't get the education that the kids in Beth Tefillah are getting. They've been out on the streets. Well, enough people from the shul expressed such concern about that we've been in touch, myself and Reverend King, some people from the University of Maryland, and you had expressed support right from the start when we met and we talked with Reverend King. And you should know, by the opening in fall, there is going to be Wi-Fi in the Ashburton school and hopefully throughout the community. So we can make a difference.
Rabbi, I don't want us to get too self-serving, but I just want to point out that this was change that was made on this very show.
Yes, this was made possible by Mezoomin. And our 3rd and 5th graders are going to have a partnership with students from the Ashburton School, and that's going to be conducted by Reverend King's son, who we met as well. So getting local and the problem of racism and what's going on in our country today is local and national. And do you see, is something changing now?
Things are always changing, but it is frustrating to see that so many years after the end of slavery, after the passage of civil rights statutes, after attitudes have changed, that we still have systemic challenges in our society. It's in policing, it's in economics, it's in housing, it's in education, it's in healthcare, and it is a challenge for minority populations. So in policing, the circumstances are pretty bad. We saw that in Baltimore, and let me tell you how that happened with the Freddie Gray. Everybody knows about Freddie Gray. 5 years ago, the police in his custody, he lost his life. So we did a pattern and practice investigation by the Department of Justice to find out exactly what went wrong. Because I met with the leaders of Sandtown, where Freddie Gray lived, and they told me, I knew these people, they're good people, but they couldn't work with the police because they didn't trust the police. And they wouldn't, even though somebody may commit a crime in their community, they wouldn't turn that person over to the police because they felt that person would be mistreated by the police. So they had no confidence. Why did that happen? Well, it happened somewhat innocently in Baltimore in what was known as zero tolerance, where police officers were under tremendous pressure to have a certain number of arrests. So what did they do? They went to Black communities in order to find the ability to, in some cases, provoke people into misconduct so they could be arrested. And the communities were turned against police. They did racial profiling. Look at the number of African Americans who were stopped by police. We could look at the number of drug convictions for selling drugs, 3 times higher for African Americans than whites, even though the sellers of drugs are more white than Black. Or you can look at the sentencing for other crimes, and you find that even though we know the numbers of who commits the crimes, those that are in our prisons are much higher African American. That's a fact. And we've got to deal with that as a society. So I introduced, even before Freddie Gray, a bill that would end racial and religious profiling. Now, if you have specific information about a crime, an identifier, use it. We want to catch that person. But to say that we are going to identify a full community for different types of scrutiny, that's just not America. It's not our values. It's wasting money, and it can be deadly, as we've seen over and over again. So we still have progress to make. I hope this is the opportunity that we can make some progress. And I can tell you, we are spending a lot of time working across party line. I said this yesterday to a meeting we had with the interns in Washington. If we're going to get things done, Democrats and Republicans have to work together. So we got to figure out a way to bridge that gap. We did that, as I mentioned, on human rights with what I did with Senator McCain. We did that with the CARES Act on COVID-19 when we passed that by unanimous vote in the United States Senate. We got to get back to those days, because I think we all recognize, you mentioned the digital divide. We've got to close the digital divide. It's wrong for children not to have access to the internet, because if they don't have access to the internet, they will be denied a full opportunity of education today, even when our schools are open. When they're closed, you see it very clearly. But education doesn't end at the end of the school day. They have to be able to connect to the internet when they go home. So we've got to make this progress in America. I'm doing it in regards to wealth with small businesses, making more opportunities available to minority small businesses. We need to narrow the wealth gap in this country. We've got to live by our values. And our values are that this is a country that values justice and equality. And we've been on that path. We've made progress, but we have to make more progress.
I just want you to know, you, without even knowing it, helped make the Wi-Fi in Ashburton possible, because when I spoke to two officials today to push this program, I said, by the way, you should know that Senator Cardin is a member of my congregation. And wow, all of a sudden, I was somebody. So I want you to know, I really appreciate that.
Rabbi, I heard that you said Senator Cardin is a member of my congregation, and last week he spoke to the King of Jordan.
No, I'm going to tell you all the story. I've told it before, but I think I'm going to wrap up with this story. My first real story. Well, my first real story about the Cardin family is when I became the rabbi of Beth Tefillah congregation. Maya Cardin was the president of the congregation. My first Shabbos was the bar mitzvah of Andy Cardin, who was the senator's nephew and who was chosen as the best.
There he is.
There he is. Best pediatrician in Baltimore. And I will definitely attest to that. But the thing that told me anything and everything I needed to know about this man was when he first was elected to the House of Representatives, he invited me to Washington to participate in the ceremony. Now, most of you by now know how long I stay at these ceremonies. So I left and I came home and I went to Mincha services. So you know how many years ago this was. And there at Mincha services were Ben and Howard. They had yahrzeit that day. So in the midst of becoming a member of the U.S. Congress, nothing was more important than coming to shul to say in Kaddish. Well, that's when I knew what my brother Saul reminds me of. Have all of you ever wondered who watches C-SPAN at 3 o'clock in the morning? My brother Saul. And from time to time, my brother Saul will call me up and say, you know, all of these guys, they're so full of crap. Your member, Cardin, is the only one who makes any sense. So, Ben, we thank you for making us look good. We thank you for sharing the evening with us. This was really enlightening to all of us. Well, and Myrna, we thank you for everything.
Well, I want to thank you. By the way, I want to get to that trivia question for one moment, because you might not know this, but first of all, when I was elected to the United States Senate, I overnight became an expert on any subject, so I can answer any question at any time. But more importantly, I went to Beth Tefillah Hebrew School, so I know everything there needs to be about Hebrew at all.
Okay,
so anyone knows it was Aaron's staff that grew almonds, or in your words, almonds, because that's how he was legitimated as the high priest. Anybody knew that.
Oh my God. How many senators you think know that one? Oh my God.
And thanks for bailing us out because we did not know the answer.
No.
We have a lot of good questions.
It's all yours.
Senator Cardin, thank you so much for joining us. My favorite Senator Cardin story is that he was in shul for a yurtzeit on a Mincha Maariv, and it happened to be that we had just done a conversion for someone earlier in the day, and we decided that instead of doing, when someone converts, if they had been married before, you have to have a remarriage. So usually that happens in the rabbi's office, but we had an idea. It'd be fun to come into shul, and in between Mincha and Maariv, we'd have a real quick wedding. So we decided to do that. I saw Senator Cardin was sitting there. I said, listen, after we sing Simon Tov Maz, if you could stand up and say on behalf of the United States Senate, government, we want to. And sure enough, they had a senator at their wedding bringing congratulations and mazel tovs from everyone. But thank you so much for joining us. And, I think it's really important that people see that there's nuance to these conversations. And that's really what we're missing. If I would give you a piece of advice, Senator Cardin, not that you asked me, but, if you want to get your name in the news more, you just need to say outlandish things. That's like how you get... Right? But people don't talk about the people who are sitting kind of behind the scenes working hard on nuance. It's not about sound bites. It's about actual real change. And I absolutely remember that from the town hall that we had and discussing the need for education. Like that's really where these pieces are going to come down to. So
what Rabbi Posner said kind of plays into the piece of connected to the almonds and the staff, because the two other answers, I put them in there on purpose because one of them said the staff swallowed up the other staff. The other one said it grew bigger than the other staff. And that's kind of like what Rabbi Posner was talking about, like making all the noise of fighting each other. But the real change can come from what you're doing, Senator Cardin, trying to, grow fruits and do positive things and push forward positive agendas. So may Hashem bless you to continue to do that.
Absolutely. And as we wrap up this Mezoomin, we want to tell everyone that Mezoomin's going on vacation. What happened is we tried to get another senator for next week and we couldn't get one. So we decided we got to slow down. I do see that we have Dr. Kleinberg on here. One second here. And we're going to have him on. We are grateful to the advice that he's been giving us as we've been going through trying to figure out what sanctuary and what Shabbos, what high holidays looks like. We look forward when we get back to a bunch of great guests, and he's definitely going to be one of them to update us on the latest with COVID and with all of the restrictions that are going on. Rabbi Wohlberg?
What makes Dr. Kleinberg unique is he knows what he's talking about. And there are very, very few people these days who can lay any claim to that, although he has told me that whatever we plan, it's going to be wrong because things are changing so rapidly. Dr. Kleinberg, please just let everybody know who you are. Dr. Kleinberg is one of Anna's lovely wife, Allison, are members, regular attenders, and Dr. Kleinberg is, let me see if I get this right, the Director of Infectious Diseases at University Hospitals Cancer Center. How's that?
That is correct. And let me just add another Ben Cardin story in that he was present at my eldest son's bar mitzvah and gave a very hearty handshake to my wonderful son, Jeffrey, after he did a perfect laning job of the entire parsha.
There you go.
That nice, wow.
Still a strong memory. He is also a pediatrician, much like the other Dr. Cardin.
Yeah.
I got it.
That's awesome. Rabbi Wohlberg, when Dr. Kleinberg told you that whatever we would do would be wrong, is that when you said to me, you're in charge?
Yeah, you take over, Rabbi Posner. This sounds like something that would be perfect for you.
Anyhow, so we are going to be on vacation throughout July. One of those Thursday nights in July is Shiva Asar B'Tammuz. Another Thursday night in July is Tisha B'Av. So you'll be seeing us, but it won't be on Mezoomin. but we also have a fantastic cooking series. It's a Thursday night, different countries in the world, different types of culinary expertise and food. And that's going to be happening on Thursday nights. So I know you won't be able to see us, but you can sign up for that. I know there's already at least 80 people signed up, and maybe more by now.
There's at least 100 people for each evening.
At least 100 people for each evening.
A lot of people doing that.
So there we go. Yeah, we got a slide up there. So I encourage you to join us. The first one is next week, and it's going to be Israel with Lee Jacobs. And you can prepare. Once you register, they'll send you the ingredients. You can be in your home and cook a special food for that upcoming Shabbat. So we hope that you'll join us for that. As I said at the outset of the show, we hope that you will join us at least on Zoom. Please, again, don't just show up to shul if you have not registered. You need to register. But you can join us on Zoom 6:50 tomorrow evening. We'll daven mincha, our first one bank in sanctuary. We are grateful, really grateful to God that we're heading in this direction where we're able to come back, of course, safely and cautiously, but we're excited about that too. So we'll stay on for a short time now in the after party for those who want to stay on. The recording on Facebook Live is going to stop. And from all of us to all of you, how's that?
Thanks a lot. Thank you.
Take care, everyone.
Stay safe, everyone.
Bye-bye.
All right. Welcome to the after party for all those staying around. Let's give people a chance.
It's like these
Well,
kind of thing.
You want to see the after party?
Yeah, I'm exiting out.
All right. I'm going to mute everyone, but if you have anything you want to say or any questions or any comments, you can raise your hand or unmute yourselves. Spanning to see how we're doing. Any words from our president this evening? Dr. Davis, you're unmuted.
No, I was looking at Searle. He's listening to Black Sabbath again. Something's wrong.
I hope
want
people,
to know what Searle's listening to. What's on his private playlist? He's talking, but he's muted.
hold on a sec. I'll unmute you. So you can hit unmute.
Thank you. I was trying to do that. I don't listen to Black Sabbath. I only listen to Ron. I'm loyal. Ron singing is the highlight of my musical week now that we don't get to hear
Ron,
the
you should
Chazan that
know,
much.
It gets the second most clicks in the emails that go out to Rabbi Wohlberg's Parsha video.
If it wasn't for Searle, I wouldn't have half of my material. So I got. It says something about Bethel, I'm afraid.
I'm afraid.
I hope people are going to join us tomorrow night. Come by the main entrance, 4 o'clock. Not tomorrow night, tomorrow afternoon, 4 o'clock. Drive by. We'll say good Shabbos. We'll give you an ice cream. Basically, it's everyone's dream. You come to shul, you go straight to the Kiddush, and you drive off.
Nice. It's got my vote.
All right, folks. Anything interesting going on?
So listen, this might be my last announcements this week. Last video announcements from back to the shul. It's a special tribute to Rabbi Posner this week, so you really want to make sure you listen.
Oh, don't want to miss that.
Did you all hear how? Did you hear how he slipped that in there? These will be my last announcements.
Maybe. Baruch Hashem.
It's true. We're actually in sort of a funny stage here where we're trying to figure out. We're trying to devote our attention to reopening, which comes with, just a load of questions, and that there's no blueprint for. And think about high holidays, but at the same time, listen, only a tiny percentage of our membership, a tiny percentage, is going to be there this Shabbat, for example. Even if everyone wanted to come, the number we can right now with proper social distancing, we can fit 250 people in our 1,600 seat sanctuary. So even if everyone wanted to come, right, we couldn't, right? So it's a tiny percentage, but we're devoting a ton of energy to getting back because we got to get back moving. But we've been wondering about some of the online stuff that we've been doing, the videos we've been doing, you know, how long do you keep that up? Or, you know, you start phase or whatever. So trust me, I hear you. We're going to be sending out information for those who didn't hear before, probably Monday, that will give people an idea of some of the alternatives that we're considering for the high holidays. I hope people realize that it's not going to be a regular high holidays for us.
You're not muted.
But we are, Bobby, you're not muted. You be careful.
I'm never muted.
I would love to mute him sometime.
That is definitely one of the things people are going to miss, the ability to mute people. Absolutely. All right, folks. I've stalled long
Thanks
enough.
for
I
joining
think I
us
need to
tonight.
go put my kids to bed. What, Rabbi Yoggev?
Just saying, everybody, thanks for joining us tonight. Maybe if you're able to swing by tomorrow, we have some popsicles and ice cream for you, and come say hi to us in person if you're comfortable doing so. We'd really love to see you. It's really fun. We didn't realize how fun it was going to be. Wasn't it fun, Rabbi Posner?
Oh, it
Just
was
for
so much fun. It was so much fun. We were wearing we got masks on. Our hands are clean. It's all good. And by the way, I just got this in a private chat here from Ron Davis. He's going to be offering cleanings, drive up dental cleanings. So after you get the ice cream, Ron, you're muted. Hold on here 1 second. I got to unmute you. You got to unmute yourself. What'd you say?
I said unmute me.
Yeah, this would be fun. What else we can do? Drive up.
I told everybody they'd get a 2% discount if they mentioned Beth DeFilla.
Come and get some floss tomorrow, everybody.
Absolutely.
All right, take care.
We added a Zonet mute button to the services in the sanctuary. It's going to be at the president's desk. We're going to be able to mute people. It's going to be great.
It's going to be at the president's desk, and he's going to finally use it one time. He's going to mute the chazan, and you know what's going to happen? The chazan has an eject button. The chazan has an eject button under the bima for the president's seat.
Good times.
All right, it's great to see all of you. Have a great evening. And please join us on Zoom tomorrow night at 6:50 to see us going back into the shul. It's a special moment.
Take care. Many blessings to everybody.
Bye-bye.